long before I came to realize that the problems facing chimpanzees are closely related to the problems facing Africa, and I soon came to understand that, in many cases, these problems could be laid directly at the door of the unsustainable lifestyle of the elite societies around the world, a lifestyle hatched in the Western world and exported, along with its values, or lack of them, and its technology to the developing world. To help my chimpanzees, therefore, I had to start thinking of ways of opening the eyes of those who were unknowingly robbing the natural world of her non-renewable resources, states Jane Goodall in her book Harvest for Hope. She goes on to say that it has become increasingly clear that growing, harvesting, selling, buying, preparing, and eating foods plays a central role in the world, and it is equally clear that some things are going wrong. Much of our food is unhealthy. Many people are no longer aware of where their food comes from. Some have no idea what they are eating. How did the most elemental of all activities, nourishing our bodies, become such a predicament? How can we do our part to become part of the solution to this global issue? Simply stated, by education, by knowing and caring what we are putting into our bodies, to nourish ourselves and where it comes from. We live in an era when poisoning the earth, water, and air by agricultural chemicals is making people, animals, and the environment sick, even creating diseases. If it's not food, don't eat it. The definition of food is that it is anything nourishing to the body. Switching from low-quality, chemical-laden, processed foods to higher-quality, additive-free foods has been proven to increase the quality of life and reduce symptoms of illness. Thus, one could conclude that those processed foods that may increase the signs of illness would not be considered foods at all. In her article, If It's Not Food, Don't Eat It, author Kelly Hayford reports an estimated 90% of food budget dollars are spent on processed packaged foods. It seems that consumers are merely looking at the cost while not even considering the quality. Well, surprise, surprise. So are the big multinational corporations that are making the food, conducting the research, and in turn poisoning the planet, the animals, and you and me. The U.S. Department of Agriculture's mission statement states that it is to support the sale of the agricultural commodities produced by U.S. farmers. On the USDA's website, it states they are responsible for the safety of meat, poultry, and egg products. Conflict of interest? It appears so. No wonder the USDA Foods Pyramid recommends so much meat and dairy in the American society. We all know that fruit and vegetables are the most densely nutritious foods for us, so it is a wonder why bread, pasta, and grains have consumed the bottom and largest section of the food pyramid until recently, when a new pyramid was made. Shockingly, when the original food pyramid was constructed, all the big agri-food industry giants lobbied for their product to get that spot. Guess who won? The big name cereal grain producers, such as Monsanto. The USDA is putting health of the American people as well as the rest of the world into their wallets. It's time that we educate ourselves and move away from what the government regulating industry says and listen to our own bodies. While doing so, we will save our home for ourselves and future generations. Traditional farming rotated their crops and livestock and let their land rest for a year or so before it had been overused. This allowed for the land to remain fertile and useful for generations. When agribusiness stepped in after World War II, all that changed. They came in and changed the way farming is done, therefore changing the way we eat. They developed what is now known as monoculture agriculture. One crop is planted on field after field, year after year, never allowing for a different crop or the rest period in order to create the healthy balance that the land knew before. This monoculture helps cut down on costs by decreasing the amount of machinery needed to tend the land. Farmers depended not heavily but entirely on one crop's success for his own, while disease or adverse weather could completely destroy it. So then came along chemicals to secure the crop. The chemicals were laden with lead, arsenic, and sometimes mercury to fend off insects and protect from freeze and wind. Hayford points out that every year a staggering 2.6 billion pounds of pesticides and herbicides are sprayed onto foods and in pastures. These chemicals deplete the soil of their nutrients, therefore the entire ecosystem now depends on the chemicals for their survival. Because certain strains maintain higher market values, the agribusiness tends to grow only one strain of crop, and the genetic diversity disappears and the entire ecosystem is stressed. Insects are lost, thus birds have less to eat, and therefore the circle of life is changed forever. The U.S. National Academy of Sciences comments, America's principal crops are impressively uniform and impressively vulnerable. We could add on that the rest of the world is also. This chemical introduction gave way to a whole new era for big agri corporations to profit by creating new strains of organisms, by this I mean the food we eat, that wouldn't be susceptible to insect invasion. These foods are now called genetically modified organisms, or GMOs. GMOs are made by inserting genetic material from one species into the DNA of another. This was their response to the revolt against the high usage of pesticides and herbicides on our crops. When the reality is that by genetically modifying foods, it creates a species that won't die when sprayed, but the pests and the surrounding weeds will. This is the case for 80% of the GMO acreage, while the other 20% of acreage is used for such crops that by changing the genetic code creates resistance to pests themselves instead of requiring the use of pesticides. However, we don't know the long-term effects that this altering will have on humans. Considering the most extensive research has been done by the big agribusinesses themselves, they will continue to tell us that there is no harm being done to humans. However, the most thorough testing of the effects of GMOs on animals was conducted in the UK at the Rowett Research Institute by Hungarian scientist Dr. Arpad Padutsky. He found that the nutritional content of the food used in the experiments was exponentially devalued from that of its parent strain, while the USDA will claim that the parent and daughter strains have the same nutritional value. The experiment continued to find that when the daughter strains were fed to the rats, all their immune systems were weakened. The thymus and spleen were damaged. Some rats developed smaller brains, liver, and testicles, while others had enlarged pancreas and intestines. By the end of this experiment, he concluded that because the results of the adverse symptoms, it had to be the process of creating genetically engineered foods that caused the damage and dysfunction to the rat's bodily functions. This was a shocking revelation to Dr. Padutsky due to the previous studies he had read, but then he came to be appalled by the small number of tests actually performed on GMOs and the lack of integrity in the research. Interestingly enough, it has been and continues to be observed that animals have an instinctive aversion to genetically engineered foods. Wellbeing Journal, September 2003, did a story about an experiment a farmer named Bill Lashmer performed on his cows. In the experiment, he filled one trough with genetically modified corn known as BT corn and another with naturally shelled corn. He watched as every cow sniffed the BT corn and devoured the natural. I could give you story after story of the like, but you get the idea. They won't eat this stuff. Why are we? Humans have always looked to nature for inspiration. What's wrong with now? And the choices we are making each and every time we put something in our mouths. Let's follow the animals as our leader and stop eating this so-called food and eat the natural to protect our bodies from disease and illness. By the way, bacteria and insects won't eat McDonald's food either. This burger is 6 weeks old and has never been refrigerated. Yummy. As more and more of our fields get polluted with chemicals or GMOs, it becomes harder and harder to find truly organic foods to nourish us. Third-generation canola crop farmer of Saskatchewan, Canada, Percy Schmeisser, was shocked when he received a letter, yes, from the great Monsanto, accusing him of patent infringement and demanded restitution for using their seeds. Schmeisser had never purchased seeds from Monsanto and never used them, but their biotechnology managers found that up to 8% of his organic crop was contaminated with Monsanto's genetically modified crop. Aren't plants created to recreate via wind, insects, and animals? Since when could you patent seeds? Aren't they made by Earth herself? Not anymore. The big agrochemical businesses are taking over and destroying our land, our economy, and our choices. What can you do? We need to start demanding the labeling of GMO products. Pressure grocers to stop carrying products with hidden GMOs in their stores. Until labeling happens, the best guarantee you have of avoiding these monster chemicals and monster corporations is to stick to organic foods and avoid the top GMO crops, soy, corn, and canola, which in 2000 consisted of 80 million acres of land worldwide. By the way, after 6 years, Schmeisser's case made it to the Canadian Supreme Court. $400,000 later in legal fees, Monsanto's patent claim was upheld, but because he didn't profit from the infringement, he owed them nothing. By being part of this world, not just in it, we can learn to make more educated decisions about the food we use to nourish and heal our bodies. We can all do our part to help Jane Goodall protect her chimpanzee friends, the developing world, our world, and that for future generations.